Okay, so first, I want to just provide a bit of context. And then Gareth will explain his proposal. And afterwards, we'll hold a discussion where Gareth will respond to any of your questions about his proposal. We have an hour scheduled for this call, so we'll finish on time or early if necessary. And this event is being recorded because, of course, we want to share this more widely with the community afterwards. One thing about housekeeping, because we want to run the call in the following way. If you have any questions, then please save them until the Q&A by using the raise hands function on Zoom, or by adding them to the Q&A function. Please be respectful when you ask questions and when you participate in the Q&A. It'll be great. Please don't take more than 2 minutes, just to be concise, to allow everyone to have the chance to speak. And if anyone has strong disagreements about the proposal, then perhaps they can ask their questions first to ensure those kinds of questions and issues can be discussed. Okay, so just as a bit of background, so Gareth has authored a MIP, a Mina improvement proposal. So this allows us to remind the community about our MIP process that is outlined on GitHub. The MIP process is the main mechanism for the community members to propose changes to the protocol or new features of Mina. The process is open to all community members. You can view submitted proposals on GitHub, but you can also propose your own ideas by following the process that's also outlined there. The MIP process, at a high level, these are the key stages of the process: drafting, reviewing, last call, and finalization. So to begin with, for example, this MIP has been in a draft phase where Gareth, as the author, has drafted it and submitted it onto GitHub according to the guidelines outlined on GitHub. Then it's moved into the review phase where a MIP author seeks and incorporates feedback from the community, as well as from specific subject matter or other experts. And so, for example, that can include community calls like this one, as well as discussions on GitHub and Mina research. And then last call and finalization allow final opportunities for feedback and also for approval. A group of MIP editors ensure that the process is followed correctly as a proposal moves through these stages. Now, if Gareth's MIP completes the process successfully, then the plan is to hold a community vote on-chain at the start of January to decide whether it should be implemented or not. And the details about this vote will be published in the next few days. However, it's an open process, so MIP authors can always retract their proposal, and feedback during the review phase could result in a MIP not making it to community vote. Not necessarily that's the case now, but just as a reminder about the process in general. So having outlined that bit of background, over to you, Gareth. Would you like to take us through your proposal, please?
Okay, thanks for that intro, Ben, and thanks for coming, everybody, and thank you to the Mina Foundation for hosting this call. So this is the first MIP on Mina that's kind of made it into this review process, and the MIP is to remove Supercharged rewards. There are links to the actual MIP there and to the slides. This is actually a pretty simple MIP, so I'll just spend a few minutes kind of summarizing it here, and then we'll have plenty of times, as we mentioned, for a Q&A and discussion after. Oh, can you bump it along, please? Okay, so just as a quick overview on what we're going to touch on. Firstly, we'll just say, like, what are Supercharged rewards and what is the rationale for actually removing them? Next, we'll kind of look at the expected outcomes if this MIP actually gets implemented. Then I'm just going to briefly touch on some alternatives, or I guess probably better said, some additions to the tokenomics, such as fee burning. And I'll hopefully show that this MIP is actually kind of complementary and a good first step, and a broader approach to tokenomics can probably follow in a subsequent hard fork. And like I said, at the end, we can do Q&A. Can you bump it along, please?
Sure.
Okay, so just really quickly, what are supercharged rewards? So reading from the tokenomics paper, Mina protocol is designed to provide supercharged rewards, extra block rewards, i.e. supercharged rewards to block producers that stake with unlocked tokens during the first 15 months after launch. So a lock token here in the context is one that's subject to vesting and was included in the Genesis ledger with some additional timing information. So anything you kind of buy on exchanges or anything is actually unlocked. This has to be specifically, it had been included in the Genesis ledger. Probably the most pertinent part here is that it was always clearly stated that these were seen as a temporary mechanism to bootstrap the staking on Mina. We've actually seen a pretty high staking participation rate. I'll show you examples in a second, but it's likely such incentives are actually no longer required. Next slide, please. So I won't go over all this, but how they actually implemented, there's a constant in the protocol known as the supercharged Coinbase factor, which is currently set as 2. So basically, if an account that wins the chance to produce a block for a slot only has unlocked tokens, the Coinbase is supercharged and will get 1,440 Mina versus the regular Coinbase, which would be 720 Mina. I've deliberately left the specifics of how this is implemented out of the proposal because we'll get some input from the engineering team. But basically, if this MIP is implemented, it specifies that the locked and unlocked tokens must have the same Coinbase value of 720 Mina. Essentially, that's setting like the supercharged Coinbase factor to 1. But alternatively, we could like remove the notion of a supercharged Coinbase entirely from the protocol. And then I just put lastly, if we didn't implement this MIP, then the supercharged rewards would actually continue in perpetuity and would actually eventually see a higher expected inflation rate moving forward. Next slide, please. So this chart kind of illustrates the proposed schedule. That's the line in orange there, where supercharged rewards would to start at 24%, and then there would be step changes down, probably when there would have been a hard fork, and then they would have been removed entirely after about 15 months, where they would drop down to 12%, which was the expected inflation rate for the network for the first 2 years. So that's the orange line, and in blue, that's the actual supercharge yield to date. So it started a little lower, about 23.5%, and then it's dropped. And it's dropped because there's a fixed Coinbase, but the total currency has actually been increasing all the time. So if you look right now, we're about epoch 42. So we're just below 20% now. It's about 19.4% for the current epoch. So this MIP specifies that locked and unlocked tokens would have the same block rewards. And locked rewards are the red line at the bottom of the chart there. So essentially, implementing this MIP, essentially the blue line would drop to the red line. Essentially, the unlocked yields would be cut in half. So it'd be going from about 19.4% down to about 9.7%. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, so it's certainly worth considering the risk to any changes like this. So there are some security concerns due to a potential reduced staking rate with lower rewards. Obviously, it's a proof of stake system, so the security is dependent on the amount of active stake. There's a really useful benchmark. It's from one of Evan's forum posts on Mina research. But the quote is that OO1 Labs had previously determined that 75% participation rate was kind of the threshold of ensuring the maximal security of the network. And I'll show the actual rates in a second. There's also the kind of the economics of block production. Certainly the Mina price, I think everyone's noticed it's depressed, certainly from all-time highs. So the rewards if we reduce the rewards further, they may not really encourage self-staking, and you might prefer to delegate to fewer providers who can actually reach a certain scale to be profitable, which could be seen as a centralization risk. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so given like 75% was seen as the threshold, and in that forum post, Evan actually suggested that kind of 82.5% would be a nice kind of buffer to stay above. Let's take a look at kind of the current staking participation rates. So it's not actually possible to determine this exactly because Mina has this probabilistic consensus mechanism, but we can get a lower bound on this by looking at how much stake was actually involved in producing a block during any epoch. So if we look way back to the beginning of the network, we can see we were approaching kind of 95%. And while it's kind of been trending down lately, we're still probably closer to 85% and well above the threshold suggested. It's worth noting actually on this that kind of most of this unstaked is just sitting on exchanges. Binance alone equates for north of 80 million of these tokens. So I guess the lesson there is kind of get your tokens off the exchanges. And I think that given that staking Mina is pretty frictionless, there's no bonding, there's no lockups, I don't think we're likely to see a dramatic fall off in staking just by reducing the returns. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to assess kind of the effect of this change, we kind of need to know the current situation. So this is a chart of the change in total currency per epoch, but expressed as an annualized figure. So kind of just to put some numbers on it, in the last epoch there, 41, there were around just below kind of 5 million added in block rewards. And the total currency was around 975 million. So if you annualize that figure, it comes out to kind of around 12% an annual inflation rate. You'll see there's actually quite a bit of variance there. It's due to the number of blocks produced in an epoch, but also the percentage makeup of normal and supercharged blocks, which is actually slightly increasing over time as the number of unlocked tokens increases. But given all of that, we've actually seen kind of an 11.53% inflation rate, which is actually pretty much bang in line with the initial tokenomics, which suggested 12% for the first 2 years. Okay, next slide, please. So looking at the estimate, kind of if this MIP was actually implemented, we'll call like the current rate 12%. It would actually increase a bit if everybody was actually staking and all the stake was online. And there's an increasing number of unlocked tokens, so we can actually expect more supercharged blocks moving forward. But if MIP 1 is implemented, we'd be looking kind of a maximum rate of 9.7%. That's using the current epoch's total currency. If you remember from a few slides ago, the red line was sloping down, so it's actually decreasing over time. So it would actually probably be a little bit lower than this by the time the MIP actually went in. But if we use the current level of staking participation, it would actually probably be closer to around 8.5%. And again, that would continue to decline. And just for some additional context, that's going to be around 250,000 Mina of block rewards per day emitted at that level. And then at the bottom there, just to confirm that locked holders actually wouldn't see a change to their APR. If it was implemented today, it would still be 9.7%. But unlocked token holders would see their APR dropped in half from about 19.4% to 9.7%. Okay, next slide, please. So I just wanted to touch on this because Evan's made a more comprehensive kind of post on Mina research, outlining a plan for a kind of a more in-depth tokenomics model. It's a longer term model actually, which kind of aims to contain the inflation rate over the longer term, eventually reaching a net zero or potentially even deflationary, depending on the network usage. So I borrowed the chart from that forum post. It goes a little further than this MIP, but I wanted to cover it because I think they're actually complementary. So we can essentially break this down into three main parts. There's the removing of the supercharged rewards, which is the SCR line there, which is what this MIP actually does. There's reducing block rewards linearly over time. So that's the BR line there. So it goes from 720, 700, 675, etc. Which this MIP doesn't touch. And then there's also a fee burning line at the bottom there. So this MIP kind of only does the first, but if we look at the H1 2023, which would be like the hard fork in 2023 schedule, and the yield there is 8.75%, we're certainly in the same ballpark here. In addition, this kind of adds a fee burn that I'll touch on in a second, but and also a small decrease in block rewards down to 675. But given this proposal is kind of as simple as it gets for this implementation, I think this proposal kind of is a good first step. And these additional changes could actually be implemented at a slightly later date, say the next hard fork, when we have some more data on real world usage when ZK apps are live, and kind of tries to avoid doing too much right now and adding too much complexity. Next slide, please. And specifically on the fee burning, because this comes up quite a lot, because it's obviously very popular post EIP 1559. These are actually the last 30-day fees on Mina. It averages out to about 65 Mina per day. I've actually excluded a couple of outliers here that were kind of obvious mistakes in delegation. So if you replicate this, you might get a slightly higher number where kind of people have delegated, but they've sent the amount as a fee, etc. But I guess my point here is more that introducing a fee burn now is kind of meaningless, as there aren't really any fees to burn. So because if you remember, we have like 250,000 in block rewards expected if this MIP were to go in. So burning 10% would be kind of six out of 250,000 isn't really meaningful and would be largely symbolic. It's probably worth noting, I'm actually personally quite supportive of a fee burning proposal at the moment, but I don't think we have the data to support it. I think it's a better idea to kind of let ZK apps come to mainnet. I think we'll see increased usage, maybe a fee market will develop, and we can kind of research and implement this at perhaps the next hard fork. But my suggestion would be to wait for this to develop before we kind of introduce this additional complexity at this stage. Okay, I've got one more slide, I think. Okay, so lastly, I just wanted to touch on the issue of circulating supply, because it's extremely common to see arguments about inflation actually being about the increase in circulating supply rather than the total currency. Kind of while the inflation of the total supply is pretty meaningful, as I've showed, it's 12% and it would drop down to about 8 or 9%. It's kind of dwarfed by the increase in circulating supply, which is the values that you're seeing on your CoinGeckos or coin market caps or whatever. So this chart actually shows the remaining locked tokens. That's both on and off chain that will be contributing to this kind of increase in circulating supply until about February 2025, when all the tokens become unlocked. So you can see it's trending downwards. We're in this range here, 755K per day. It's probably quite hard to see, but we're kind of in the middle of that slope. So we got 755,000 Mina basically added per day to the circulating supply, and we're adding about 320,000 in terms of block rewards. After March 2023, it drops off pretty dramatically. That's when we go to 210,000 per day. And that's actually broadly in line with the expected block rewards emissions there if we implement this MIP, which would be closer to kind of 250,000 per day. I just wanted to raise this because I think it's worth noting that even after supercharged rewards are removed, there is actually still going to be a substantial increase in circulating supply until that's exhausted. And probably the biggest and most noticeable change would actually come from the reduction in circulating supply which is coming in March next year. Okay, next slide, please. So just to summarize, this MIP removes the temporary additional bonus of supercharged rewards. So all coin-based rewards would be 720 Mina. In my opinion, I think the only reason we haven't implemented this is that we haven't had a hard fork yet, which kind of leads me to my second point, which is this is the simplest possible implementation for a change in the tokenomics. This hard fork's already been delayed for quite a long time because of ZK apps, and the number of changes involved here are absolutely massive. So this kind of minimizes the development required and doesn't reduce any additional complexity. It'll reduce the inflation rate from around 12% to around 8 or 9%. It reduces the block reward APR for unlocked tokens from around 19.4% to 9.7%. The actual figures will depend on exactly when the MIP was implemented in a hard fork. As I said, it could be the first stage of implementing other tokenomic changes, such as the fee burnings or the dynamic coin bases, if we wanted to target a specific inflation rate or a reduced coin base. And lastly, it doesn't affect the circulating supply. And that's everything from me. So happy to answer any questions.
Great. Gareth, thank you so much for presenting on your proposal there. I'm going to just stop sharing here so that we can then bring everyone in and open up to a discussion. Any comments or questions? Okay, we've got a question here in the Q&A, Gareth.
Oh, I'm looking in the wrong place, I think.
Don't you think that when we reduce block rewards for SC, community will move their tokens to CX, and this will impact the security of the network?
I don't see there's any additional reason over what's happening right now. I think it would depend on if the centralized exchange offered a flexible staking product. Like Binance, as I noted, it has like 80 million plus unstaked, and I think it's largely because they don't offer a staking product that's flexible. You actually have to lock up your tokens on Binance, whereas, as everyone knows, with Mina staking, there's no lockups or anything. I'm not sure this particularly incentivizes that activity any further.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments?
I think someone's asking if they missed the vote. So I think that's worth noting that that's going to be an on-chain vote, and there's going to be details pretty soon, I believe. Ben, is that correct?
Yeah, watch this space. There'll be information about the on-chain vote coming out shortly.
And
I see there's
Go ahead, John.
Oh, yeah, I see Emery's added a question also about the timeline for the hard fork. And we don't have a timeline on that right now, Emery. But what we're doing here with the MIP is getting everything ready so we're able to move forward with it. And then we'll be able to include that in the hard fork. While we're waiting for questions, Gareth, thanks a lot for that. I really appreciate it. An amazing presentation there. I see a few comments that have come in the chat that have gone to panelists and hosts, but there's a few compliments on that.
Thank you.
Any further comments or questions?
I see we have another question in from Dor and Carol too. I'll read it out.
Yeah, go ahead.
It says, what do you think the consequences will be if we don't remove supercharged rewards?
Yeah, well, I can't speculate on the price, but because it could do anything. But essentially, you're going to see a higher inflation rate. That's about all I can say.
Thanks. And we have another question in from Carol. Carol asks, how does the vote on chain will be actually done if it's before the actual Zk app hard fork? Would that happen on the testnet? Maybe this is something you could answer if you'd like, but it's not really directly relevant to our call here. Is that something that you would like to comment on, Ben?
Sure. So we do have a vote coming up, which is about making the decision about whether to implement this change. However, the action then for that change to take place, yes, that would be waiting until the hard fork.
And if I could add to that too, Carol, yeah, thanks for the question. We have been working on ways that we can vote on mainnet on chain, and we've always been able to do that, but we're working on a tool to collect the data, and that's in progress, and we've had it tested, and that's what we're working on at the moment. I see we got a couple more questions. Christine asks, where can community members go if they have more questions for Gareth after the call? Oh, that's on the next slide, I think. Ben, do you want to give him a shout?
No need to remind myself of those details there. So
that'll come up in the next slide, I suppose. But basically, we can talk about this. As you might know, Gareth is often on Discord. So the Mina research channel there is a great place to discuss this. So if you're not in our Discord, and I think most of the people I saw in the chat were, please join our Discord. And there's a link in it would be the Mina research channel. And also we have a Mina research forum, which is at minaresearch.com. And for longer posts, that's a great place to put them. But the most, probably the fastest place to get answers would be in Discord in the Mina research channel. Jane, Andrea's next there. I see it says, if there are further questions or comments after this, where can we leave them and until when? Yeah, please leave comments, questions, and you can discuss this. I'm sure Gareth will be around along with other people, and Mina Research in Discord is probably the best place for that. If you have really long detailed posts that you'd like to keep up, please follow the link that will come in the next slide to the Mina Research. And that link there, the slide deck will be shared later. That link will be available to everyone through that slide. And it's a very long thread discussing this. It has the post that Evan made that Gareth referenced in the call today. And it has a lot of input from many members on this. So especially for longer things, the minaresearch.com is a very good place for that. But to chat, probably faster answers might be in the Discord channel. Jane, thank you for making it today. Jane's question says, so for how long can we postpone this process with reducing SR, or we need to do it immediately? SR, I'm not sure what that is.
Supercharged rewards, probably.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there we go. Did you want to answer this one, Gareth?
Yeah, I can try. Personally, I don't see it as a particularly urgent issue. I would imagine it would be rolled into the hard fork whenever it happens. I think it's worth noting that, like as I showed, the actual inflation rate has actually been slightly below what was even projected, which was 12%. That's because mainly not all the stake has been actively staking. So if everyone was staking, we would actually be seeing a slightly higher inflation rate. But as it's still below 12% currently, I wouldn't call this an urgent change. I think this is kind of more planning for the future and setting the stage for getting a long-term handle on inflation. That would be my answer.
Great,
others may disagree.
Yeah, good. Everyone knows where to do it now, so we can continue discussions if they do. Thanks a lot for the question, Jane. It looks like there might have been, did anyone catch any of the questions in the chat?
I think Jane moved her chat question to the Q&A.
Oh, okay, great, thank you.
Did we address Phil's question?
I didn't see Phil's question.
It's in our chat. If the MIP passes, is there an expected hard fork date?
Oh yeah, we addressed that. Phil, as I mentioned to Emre, We don't have an expected date on the hard fork. It'll be announced before that. And what we're doing here is Gareth has proposed the MIP and started it through the process more formally now, and it's moving ahead. So we're moving towards, finalizing that and getting everything done for that. So whenever the hard fork is, it can be included with everything already done in advance.
I think you answered Emre's next one there too.
I'm missing something.
In the Q&A, are we going to wait for other improvements for the hard fork, or are we expecting the fork will just be for reducing rewards? I would expect the former. That this will be rolled in with other changes such as ZK apps, etc.
Thanks. I see a question from anonymous attendee. It says, do you have any ideas on how to encourage more people to stake if this MIP is implemented?
Yeah, so I mean, I think as we saw, like we're already at close to probably 85%. The remaining stuff is mostly on exchanges, so maybe that's kind of a whole ecosystem kind of issue. Better wallet support, this sort of stuff, making people feel more comfortable custodying their own Mina. So yeah, and I think there are a couple of other large accounts that just aren't staking, like a coinless wallet or something. I think the actual staking rate from kind of users is probably much higher than 85%.
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. And as you mentioned, as Gareth mentioned, this is probably a great question for Mina research. I mean, it's quite a wide question, and there's a lot of people that would have some good ideas about that. And that's one of the amazing things about having such a vibrant community, is that there's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of great ideas. And so that's something worth bringing up in one of the channels. Thank you for the question. There's another question from Emery, but I'm having trouble seeing it.
That's the one we just answered.
The same one. Yeah, that's what I was worried about. Okay, great. Thanks for all the questions, Emery. I mean, please keep asking. This is the forum to do it. Oh, and we had a very good comment from Dor in, and Dor says, you'd like to remind everyone that if you have any objections or concerns about the proposal, please voice them. And this is a great place to do it. I mean, Gareth's here right now. He's able to answer directly, and you can ask these questions elsewhere too, especially if you're watching this on the recording or English is a worry. Please post them in other channels. And if you do have language concerns, if English is not your first language, we do have regional community managers in many areas. And we also have in Discord a number of language channels, and you're very, very welcome to ask them in there. We do have the community moderators who monitor those channels, and some of them, they don't speak those the languages of the channel necessarily, but they do check them and they do translate them, and they can pass along your questions or concerns. So yeah, very much, please have your say. It's a very important part of the community and our governance program. Let's see, there was one more thing in the chat there about a survey. What is that?
That's for me, John. I was actually going to just launch a survey to the community members to see how they're feeling about this MIP as of now. So I'm going to launch that. Feel free to respond to it.
So please understand, this is not a vote. Actually, Lindsay, it says only the host and the panelists can vote on there. But please understand, this is not the vote. This is just a quick poll Lindsay's putting up to get your ideas. Vote will happen on chain, and that will be coming as the MIP progresses through the various stages. And it's progressing very well. It's in the review stage at the moment. Lindsay,
it looks like 12 have voted, 14 now, so I think it is open to everyone.
Okay, great. And please, I'll say it again,
Not
just so
voted,
everyone.
sorry. Submitted
This is
their,
not a vote on the proposal, this is a poll. Yeah, you can never be too careful.
Sure thing.
Oh, I see. We have another question in from Jason, or comment. It says, Jason says, so I agree. Moving off CEX is good. Are there any recommended staking pools to join? That's a kind of loaded question there.
I'll recuse
Gareth,
myself
would you
from
like
that
to take
question.
I'm sure Jason probably knows, but others may not. Gareth does run a staking pool as well. So you can find that on wherever you like. Do your own research.
Good answer.
Maybe, do you have a recommendation, Jason?
Oh, nice.
I saw the question went answered. We do have a very large number of staking pools out there. Gareth is certainly one of them. You'll probably find it up the top of the list if you're ranking in terms of size. And there are different places you can find that. I'd recommend you do your own research, and you can ask about that in Discord or just do a search. And for those kind of things like that, please check around. There's many ways you can look at this as well. Some people just look at the rewards, but there are many ways to focus on that. And yeah, please do your own research. There was something that came up in chat just now.
Yeah, Christina shared a link to a tool she uses to search for staking pools.
Thanks, Christine. That's great. Emery said after that, most of the validators are okay. Don't hesitate to reach out to owners of pools and ask your questions. Yeah, thank you, Emery. That's really good advice. Because, you know, occasionally if you have a question or something urgent, and if the person's contactable, that's quite a useful thing to know. Christine comes back with, perhaps there are other dashboards as well. Feel free to share. Yeah, in addition to Christine's link, yeah, you can find this information elsewhere too. So.
I wonder if we've got results from our survey. Have they come in yet, Lindsay? How are we doing with the participation there?
Oh,
I'm sharing.
I can see that now. It says, here's the question for those on the recording. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this. It says, what would you vote for MIP OO1? Approve. And we've had 15 people vote. 13 people approved that. That's an 87%. One person of the 15 rejected the suggestion, and that's 7%. And one person out of 15 was unsure, which is also 7%. And again, please remember, this is not the vote on the MIP. This is a poll just to get people's general feeling. The vote will take place at a later date, and we'll announce it in all our social media channels, and when it's ready for anything to be voted on. Well, we still have quite a bit of time left if anyone has any questions. If not, we can sign off a bit early and give everyone some time.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, sure thing. Well, if that's the case, then thank you very much, Gareth. That's been really helpful, and thanks for everyone coming along today. And just to reiterate what John was saying there, that details about on-chain voting will be communicated very, very shortly.
And we also share details about this call along with a recording in the slide deck. And on the slide deck, you'll be able to find some links. You'll be able to check the links if you didn't see them during the call. And thanks so much for attending. It's really great to see so many people come out and support the community and to be interested in this thing. We're looking forward to Gareth's MIP moving ahead, and and further ones coming in the future as well. And I think we owe a big shout out here from everyone to Gareth. Thank you for that. Amazing presentation, and thank you for putting in all the work to make this happen.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.